And so, Ken, can you please tell me a little bit about yourself and your current company?
Sure. My name is Ken Adamo. In my current role, I am Chief of Analytics at DAT Freight Analytics. So at DAT, we have two large business lines within our business. We have our DAT1 line of business, which is most known for our load board and freight matching services. I'm mostly responsible for the DAT business, which is all things freight data and analytics. We look at benchmarking, predictive rating, historical rating outlook, and custom analytics for our customers. Pretty much everything we do helps our customers take the uncertainty out of freight. And as we know, the market's been ever the more volatile. So we've been quite busy at that task over the past year and a half. But prior to joining, I was in the industry for the better part of 7+ years doing pricing, data science, and general analytics.
Yeah. So I guess to really kick it off, how has your role changed since the pandemic started?
So I'm in an interesting case because I was remote before it was cool. So I'm based in Ohio. We have offices in Portland, Oregon, and Denver, Colorado. So I think the biggest thing that's changed is we've had to be more present with our customers and our partners, even though we've been forced to be more distant, if that makes any sense. So we've been checking in a lot more. We've been taking a more consultative approach, right? We're a software company. That's what we do. We provide software as a service for our customers, but we also layer on top of that the insight. So we've made critical staffing hires in the area of industry analysis. We've been touching in with partners and customers and just trying to learn as much as we're sharing those learnings because things have just been wild, right? I mean, we had last April and May with the lockdown, stock shortages to the kind of crazy summer that we had, and just recently the polar vortex. So it's been quite the year to help those folks manage that uncertainty.
Yeah, to put it mildly, I think it's been a little hellish, but it's amazing what the logistics industry has been able to accomplish.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm really proud when I see a truckload of vaccine with my old company and operating company's name on the side rolling down the road, knowing what's in that truck and the value, not like the value, monetary value, but just the human value of the cargo that they're about to deliver. It's really, really a point of pride, I think, for everyone working in the industry.
Right. I was talking to someone the other day and I asked the question, what should people know about the supply chain? And he said how important truckers are, because at the beginning of the pandemic, they didn't even know where they could stop to go to the bathroom. And it hit me like a wall because I couldn't even comprehend that. It was just, they're just so important, and people like you who are doing the analytics behind it, I just think are really keeping not only the industry moving, but keeping the world afloat in this tough year.
I think if you think of the internet and the IoT of kind of today's world is the central nervous system of how all the world's economies work. I think of the supply chain is the cardiovascular, the circulatory system, right? The actual shipment of goods and facilitators of trade. And I agree with you. I mean, having come from a trucking background at my last stop, I mean, I started out at a power company, and I've gained a tremendous respect for the linemen. Every time there's a thunderstorm now, I think my mind jumps to the linemen that are going to get pulled out of bed to go get my lights back on, right? So being tied to the trucking industry, I worked for a lot of leaders while in the industry that, they would make their senior executives spend a week a year on the road with a team with a sleeper cab, experiencing what life on the road is like, because it really helps you understand, even in good times, it's not an easy job. I use that line a lot. It gets old sometimes, but it's not an easy job on a 70-degree temperate day with no traffic and, an easy pickup and delivery, because you're away from your family. Right. If you're a smaller trucker, you might not know where that next load's coming from. If you're a dock worker during COVID, you're dealing with a lot of that. It's not just trucking, right? It's if you're part of an ocean crew on a cargo ship, you might be waiting an extra week to get unloaded. That's another week away from your family. So, and it's been really great to see that reflected in some of the media recently, putting these folks at the forefront of keeping the world's economy and keeping people's shelves stocked with goods.
Right. And I think people have gotten a lot more empathetic too, because usually we're just so used to this Amazon effect and having our packages delivered to us within like a day or two. And that now, when it takes a little bit longer, people are starting to understand why that is, rather than like blasting them on social media.
Yeah, I think that's been one of the nicer side effects. I think everyone's gotten a healthier dose of human compassion, whether it's waiting in line for longer than you're used to, or dealing with a stock outage, or waiting a couple extra days for a letter or Christmas card to arrive.
Mhm.
I think we've seen people as a whole become more compassionate, as you mentioned, more understanding of, meeting those folks that are doing that essential work where they are, and understanding the situation that they're in has been and I think an overall positive impact.
Mhm. And so, what attributes do you think qualifies someone as a pro to know?
Yeah, that was an interesting question when you sent it over. And the people that I like to know, that I like to kind of have in my circle, are people that can teach me something. People are willing to make themselves available and present to teach me something or to help me through a problem and share their experiences. This is a very tight knit. It's a huge industry, right? Transportation just in America is what, $3 trillion or $2 trillion by the best estimates of total expenditure across
Mhm.
all modes. But it's a small industry. You see the same people that you've met years ago popping up here and there, and we all talk. So I think pros that I like to know are willing to talk to me about what's going well for them, what's going challenging, things that they've learned, people they've met. And like I said, it's just one of those things where this is a very network heavy. It's a good pun, right? Because you think about transportation networks as like steel in the ground,
Yeah.
structures and terminals and things like that. But it's really also a personal network heavy industry, because you never know when you're going to need someone to help you out. You never know when you need to get a tight drayage move for something coming off a ship or off the rail. And when that person can help you out, and that connection you may have made years ago, that business card you have sitting on your desk, the connection you made could pay dividends down the road.
Right. And it's not even like it's network heavy, but it's also mentoring heavy as well. Like people are often relying on one another to just learn more. There's just so many learning opportunities as well.
No, that's right. I mean, I'm in a unique position. I hire a lot of data, well, indirectly, but in my organization, we hire a lot of data scientists. And this is a field that's rather, I think, nascent to data science. It's probably only in the past 5 to 7 years that's even really been a thing.
Mhm.
You had a lot of operations research, operations analytics, kind of some of those tried and true fields, of course, but to really apply data science to the trucking industry specifically is rather new. So teaching folks that may have come from, you might have a PhD in microbiology, or you may have been a physicist, and kind of working with them to understand the ins and outs of trucking. It's a super rewarding experience, because there's such a high degree of irrationality in the field that we deal with. And there's such a human element at every touch point. This isn't medicine where if you take the medicine, it makes you feel better. And the important thing
Right.
is getting the formulation of that medicine correct, or the dosage, or the dosing schedule, or the titration. With us, it's kind of modeling the irrationality at all the different touch points. And it's, like I said, it's been fun to work with these folks and bring in more industry savvy folks to help in that effort has been one of the highlights of my job.
Mhm. And so, why do you think technology is becoming more important, especially in the trucking industry?
So it's a rush to efficiency. If you think about every shipment has a shipper and some form or fashion to haul that shipment, right? Whether it's over the ocean, over on the rail, over the road. That's a pure expense to that shipper. Shippers aren't in the business of shipping freight. They're in the business of doing what they do to generate revenue. Shipping is an expense. So from that point, once the customer has something to ship and has decided that it needs shipped, and by and large, when it goes outside of their network, all of the downstream components are in an endless struggle to make that process more efficient for the shipper, more efficient for their operations. And technology removes those frictions in that system, whether it's making the bill of lading and proof of delivery process more seamless, that takes friction out of the, rather than getting out of your cab, going to knock on the window of someone that can sign your POD, electronic PODs can help remove some of that friction. Time to quote. I can remember when I started in the industry, especially on non-asset trucking, it was a very manual process. I think you're seeing now the age of the digital broker, just an arms race around becoming more and more efficient, more and more accurate, faster response time to market, responding to market reverberations faster. It really is the benefits of competition in action as it pertains to digitization in our field. And I think it's paid dividends for those that have chose to invest in it.
Right. And then just going off a little bit more on that, what else has changed in the industry since you first started?
Speed is the number one thing for me. I mean, I think everything, all of the different ways, the speed to market on new products, the speed to market on opening new shipping routes, new technologies. I can think of, just when I was in the industry, the push towards going from, you pick something up, a pallet up with a forklift, you drive it over to the scale, get it dimensionally weighted, pick it back up and go, to kind of equipping all of the terminals with cameras and putting forklift scales in the tines of the forklift so that it could be dynamically weighed or dimensionally weighted as it was being moved around, right? Skipping processes. So you mentioned earlier these expectations. The expectation of speed on the customer side is going to continue to grow. Mm-hmm. And to do that, you're going to become all the more efficient downstream. So I've just seen that, like, kind of the need for speed just explode over the past time that I've been in the industry.
Yeah, soon it's going to be like, if you just think about it, it will show up on your doorstep.
That's a great, I didn't mean to talk over you, but that's a great point. I mean, I went, my first week on the job at my prior firm, I attended a seminar on 3D printing, and I thought, this is cool. I mean, sure, you can make a top or you can make a little dinosaur figure for your kid. By the time I left, they were 3D printing airplane parts at forward operations terminals using sintered metal 3D printers. And that's 5 to 7 years worth of progress. It's just remarkable. And I think those things just, they gain momentum and they don't slow down.
Mm-hmm. And so I know that you're a big analytics guy, and I think that is only going to be more important in the industry as we progress. So what are some things that you have done to provide problem-solving solutions to the industry?
So I'm a huge proponent of democratization of data and insights, right? These things they shouldn't be available to the few. They should be socialized to the many. And a lot of times it's not the willingness of those that have the data and insight to share it. It's the, how would you say it? Like the ability or the bandwidth or the competency of the receiver to consume it, right? Right. So I could take our predictive rating algorithm, and I'm just saying this as an example, but it's generating millions. Every week it's hundreds of millions of lines of data. If you're a small trucker, I can't make heads or tails of that, right? I'm in a cab of a truck with a cell phone and my electronic logging device. It's incumbent upon us as stewards of this data, as folks thinking about this, as folks concerned about the industry, to make that data accessible in a form that can be used by all members, by all participants of the industry. So whether it could be, hey, you're going into an area where rates are rising, or you're going into an area where there's going to be a lot more volume than there typically is. Those little bits of insight that we can parse out to take data and turn it into information are really things that I think about a lot, because it's really easy for a large firm to consume a bunch of data and kind of do operations on it themselves, turn it into the insight. They have teams of data scientists, they have teams of analysts. I think the bigger challenge is putting it in the hands of someone who just has a phone, who's sitting at a rest stop and needs to know what to do next, or a smaller brokerage firm, or a smaller shipper that hasn't really had to think about over-the-road trucking before, and now all of a sudden is responsible for moving, a couple dozen truckloads a week.
Right.
Those are the kind of folks I think that up and down the chain, making that data available for becomes crucial.
That's why I really like the DAT Trendlines report that you guys send out every week. I read it every time it gets sent to me, but it really helped when I first started out because I was only 22 and I didn't know anything about trucking. I didn't even know how to drive. So it just really helped. And it was like that scene in The Office where Michael Scott is like, can you explain it to me like I'm 5 years old? And sometimes people need it because it can just go way over our heads, and you don't want to belittle people to the point where they can't contribute to the conversation at all. And it's making them feel included in a sense.
Trendlines is like our most popular by far. I mean, we have people at major tenured professors at universities who have been hand cataloging in spreadsheets trend lines weekly going back as long as we've had it. So I used it when I was in the industry. I check it every time it came out. And when it made like when there was an interesting trend going on, I would screenshot it and send it off to other folks, and we would talk about it. But again, it's crazy to think about like the enormity of our industry.
Right.
And kind of the way that our industry stretches from, again, a dock worker, a truck driver, someone who is just as important to the process as the executive of a large shipping firm or a large ocean line. In reaching all of those folks with this data and insight is just this interesting challenge. And again, it just requires putting yourself, I think, in their perspective and what's important to them and what do they need to learn and glean. Because I would argue that at the top and bottom, the time they have to think about that thing is probably equal.
Right.
It's in the middle where these folks are being paid to think about this all day long and grind on the problem and surface it. But if I'm the CEO, my time is incredibly valuable and short and fleeting. And if I'm just waiting in the shipper's lounge, waiting to get unloaded, I can say the same thing.
Right. And it even like proves visibility as well, because I think when we talk about supply chain visibility, we often focus on like the consumer so that they can see where their packages are, where their food comes from. But this really matters to truckers as well, so that they know like even the prices of gas in certain states as well.
Transportation professionals everywhere they get wrapped around the axle on the word visibility. Is it track and trace? Is it route visibility? Is it network planning? You can think of visibility through all different lenses, but yeah, I think of like broadly things as like transparency.
Yeah.
And I think transparency is just this overwhelmingly universally beneficial thing for all participants in the market. Transparency in where the market is. I mean, could you imagine trading stocks if you couldn't pull up your phone or your computer or heck, turn on the TV and find out what the average stock price or what the Dow Jones was doing right now?
No.
I mean, could you imagine like writing a letter to your stockbroker and saying like, what's the trading price for Coca-Cola right now?
No.
But in a lot of corners of our industry, that's the level. That's like the analogous level of transparency and visibility that these folks have. I was always surprised, especially on some of the non-asset sides of our industry. There's been huge strides in this area that I'm about to outline. But from the time that package, if I was the shipper, from the time that freight, 50,000 pounds of whatever leaves my door, and I don't know that it's there safely until the receiver lets me know. I think the industry realized early on that wasn't going to fly. So there's just been huge strides. There's new market participants helping track that along its route and ensure that it's moving and getting there safely. And it's not a surprise when it does or doesn't show up.
Right.
Right.
And so besides what you have mentioned previously, are there any other challenges that you have faced within the industry? And if so, how did you overcome them?
Our industry has a really high experiential learning curve. And sometimes I've found we're so busy, we're so entrenched in what we're doing, especially on the operations side, that it's hard to find the time and find someone willing to teach you what you need to know. So when I was in the freight industry as a market participant, I handled pricing and data science. You could say at face value, I didn't need to know how we recruited, how we paid our drivers, how we operated. But if you don't understand those things, it makes it very hard to do the job you're assigned to do. So one of the ways I overcame it was kind of really buddying up, kind of almost weaseling my way into where the person couldn't say no to what I would call like a grizzled transportation engineer, right? A veteran of the industry that's done all the jobs from, being a yard boss, dealing with Teamster management relations, and really kind of picking his brain, not on just the problem at hand, but all of the things that he knew about transportation and what you should watch out for, and what are some signs that things are working well, what are some signs that things are not working so well that weren't obvious. So the best advice I can have is seek out those folks that tell you what's not in the data and learn from them. And don't be afraid to like roll up your sleeves and understand what the people who are doing the work are doing, even if that's kind of detached from the job that you're being tasked with doing, because I think it's such an interconnected industry. Like all the components, trucking, like let's just say that I'm a trucking company and I don't have any ships, right? I don't have to deal with ocean shipping, but a lot of that freight that you're going to be hauling is coming over, and understanding if there's port disruptions or ocean traffic disruptions can be very meaningful to understand as you're planning out your days, weeks, months ahead.
Right. And you always I'm not trying to say that you should always be a few steps ahead, but it helps, especially in an industry like this. It helps like prove that you are capable of handling it, because logistics is like constant chaos and you always have to problem solve. And in order to do that, you have to be ahead.
Yeah. I mean, you never want to kind of come into a problem and be like, okay, what's already happened, and have that conversation go on for an hour, right? You want to be ahead of it. It pertains to visibility, right? Even on the simple singular shipment, the singular customer's freight, you never want to call them or have them call you and ask where the freight is and say, I don't know. Right? If there's a problem, you want to know about the problem. You want to be in active mitigation steps before you ever have to have that phone call with the shipper or whoever and say, here's the problem. I know what's happening. I've already got solutions in flight. Rest assured, I'm on it. Right.
And then I think that's part of the reason why COVID really threw the entire supply chain through a loop, because people weren't proactive, they were reactive with everything.
Yeah, I think part of that was inevitable.
True.
Just look at this polar vortex. Take COVID out of it. I mean, so COVID has made the market, in my opinion, like very fragile. It's not able to metabolize these shocks like it typically would. But I mean, if you ever would have thought that you could draw a triangle from Seattle to Houston, Dallas or Houston, and then up to Boston and say all of this country is going to be frozen all at once. I mean, I don't think we can fault anyone for not preparing for that.
No.
But you're right. I think COVID is teaching us to think, to never really get comfortable. Find an uncomfortable chair so you're not always wanting to sit in it,
Yeah.
Old boss advice. He always used to advocate walking the floors. The time when you're not on a call or in a meeting, walk the floors, listen to customer calls, listen to driver calls, kind of understand what's going on out there so that you're not surprised if there's an issue brewing.
I think that's really good advice, though, because sometimes people forget this is just a huge assumption, but some people, if you work your way up the corporate ladder, sometimes people forget what it's like to be on the factory floor. So just to have that experience and be able to get on that level, it not only like humanizes you, but it helps the people get that connection as well.
I've been lucky. I've worked for several leaders who literally, when I was at my prior job, the first CEO I came in under started as a part-time customer service agent and worked her way up to CEO. Her successor started as a part-time, I think, either front desk receptionist or administrative assistant, and then worked her way up to CEO, gaining a bachelor's and master's degree along the way. So they were never too far detached. But that also means that's always a huge part of it, right? From the people side of things, being attached to the folks doing the work on the front line. But you also, you can't BS them, right? If they had done the job, saying like, it's impossible for this, and this reason, I've seen them, be like, I don't think that's true. I can remember one time I had to do this and we found a solution by doing this, and this. And I'm just like, whoa, That's impressive. And that's why you see a lot of folks that have worked their way up. Like, that's not an overly unique story. Heads of major transportation companies started in the mailroom or started on the docks, or a lot of companies promote drivers up from dock workers because it builds, or a turnover sensitive industry. I mean, our industry, especially in trucking, has monumental turnover, and small impacts, small improvements in that can have huge impacts in financial performance. The shocker, transportation's a low margin business.
Right. I guess, in your opinion, do you think as like the supply chain industry grows and becomes more education based and more colleges start to add majors, do you think that will take away from the industry or only add to it?
I think difference of opinion is great. I built a team. I've built teams in the past, and another kind of important lesson I've learned through leaders in my life, who, I guess, to your earlier question, are pros that I'm glad that I've known. Be intentional and deliberate about diversity, not just, ethnic and racial and gender diversity, but, different backgrounds. Who'd have ever thought that I'd have a PhD in microbiology on my team, thinking about the best way to match up shippers and brokers and carriers algorithmically using data science, right? So it's like, you'll constantly be surprised by those backgrounds. Now, if those folks think that they can walk in and slap their degree on a table and it's going to fast forward them through years of doing the job, that's not advice I would give anyone to try to attempt, right? Because people want to know. I think the biggest thing that you can do as a leader in our industry, especially a new leader, is be willing to humble yourself. We've talked about it in this conversation, but just to put a finer point on it, to be able to humble yourself in front of not only your team, but your extended and expanded teams, that might be down the hierarchical ladder or in different roles, I think goes a long way. And doing it honestly, right? Not like in a kind of internal marketing kind of fashion. Because I think our industry, if nothing else, has a very a spidey sense about that kind of thing. You have to be very genuine, I think, to be in transportation. I think our industry weeds out folks that are disingenuous about their intentions.
Right. I really loved that you said that you have to be diverse in just like education level and just like life experiences too, because my dad worked his way up from the factory floor to becoming the manager of his warehouse facility, and I don't think he got a lot of credit from that from peers nowadays. But it's true that you can't just base everything off of a degree, and that there are smart people out there that didn't have the schooling experience that some of us do have.
You don't have to sell me on that concept. I have a finance degree from a state school, dealing with folks with PhDs and master's degrees from top 5 universities in data science, statistics, mathematics, physics. I know firsthand. I'm not equating that, right? I think these tremendous success stories, the one that you just outlined as well, they pale in comparison. But I mean, I find myself having to grind twice as hard, right? Because I don't have the academic credentials. I don't have the classical training. I taught myself differential equations on Wikipedia when I was at the power company. I didn't have the classic academic technical training. So it's just wired into me, I think, to have that appreciation for folks that have earned it, and kind of like an inherent distrust of those who haven't. I'm speaking broadly, and I think a little bit in generalizations, but I mean, to put a finer point on it, I'm in that category who have a general distrust of folks who I don't perceive to have been in the trenches and done the work and kind of seen. And I think part of that too becomes being just like viciously customer focused, like tenaciously focused on the customers and the problems you're trying to solve. I think necessarily puts you in that mindset.
It's almost like you get the respect from people if you have done it first, rather than just like walk your way onto the floor and you're like, hey, here I am. But that's not always how it works.
There are exceptions, right? I don't want someone who, practiced, or like a veterinarian. I don't want them doing a heart bypass on my mother or something. You know what I mean? Like there are certain, like the data scientists and the advanced analytics people that I hire, like it is important that they are solving big technical problems. And I understand and have a very, very firm appreciation for what they do. And it's my responsibility to teach them that other stuff, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, especially in some of these operations roles, I think it's very crucial to have. But it's also that double-edged sword, right? When you have you ever seen like an entry-level job posted that required 3 to 5 years of experience? It's like,
Yeah.
what am I supposed,
Like, cool.
what am I supposed to do with this? Right. So again, I think it's having great mentors is so important in any industry. I mean, I had it in energy. I had a couple terrific mentors, and certainly in transportation. So finding folks that are willing to help guide you through that learning experience is crucial.
So, Ken, I know that we are running a little bit short on time. I feel like we could continue talking for hours and hours, but I just have one last question for you today. And what does it mean for you to be selected as one of the SDCE's pros to know?
Well, first of all, thank you. If I didn't say that up front, I wanted to thank you and the organization for considering me. I looked through some of the alumni list or prior winners, however you guys consider it, and it's rarefied air. So it's humbling, it's exciting. It seems like a really good crowd to be associated with. I think doing things like this, participating in industry organizations, getting out there and networking is such a crucial aspect of what we do as leaders in this field, because ultimately we're going to be the ones making those decisions that take our industry into the future, right? It's not going to happen absent the decisions that we're making today. So it's really awesome. I've really enjoyed spending time with you today and talking a bit and catching up and kind of hearing a bit about your perspective on the industry as well.
Oh,
so
thanks.
Thank you.
No problem. Well, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it.
Anytime.
Thank you.